Hello and welcome to Literary Prospects. I'm Kelly Vick, your host, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest. Karen Winn is the author of two novels, Our Little World and, most recently, The Society. Her short stories and essays have appeared or are forthcoming in Plowshares, Hippocampus, Lit Hub, Writer's Digest, and elsewhere. Her work has also been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. Karen earned her MFA from Farley Dickinson University. For her undergraduate studies, she attended the University of Pennsylvania, where she may or may not have belonged to a secret society. Before becoming an author, Karen had a career as a nurse and nurse practitioner. She lives in the charming Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston with her husband, two children, and their 100-pound Bernedoodle. Karen Winn, thank you so much for joining today to talk about your addicting new novel, The Society. Author K.T. Winn says, with socialites, scandal, and an ultra-exclusive club, The Society explores the sinister side of privilege, class, and tradition. Karen Winn's evocative prose and sharp pacing sucked me into the rarefied air of old money Boston, where power warps and secrets rule, a twisty escape. Author Mary Beth Fisher says, in this propulsive, unique page-turner of a novel, Karen Winn wrestles with the nature of secrets. Through the lives of two women from vastly different worlds whose lives mysteriously intersect, Winn illustrates beautifully how all secrets contain their own histories and rules, consequences, and risks. And author Hank Phillippi Ryan says, completely cinematic and terrifyingly plausible. You may never view Boston the same way again because you'll imagine secret societies and dangerous secrets behind every door. The Society is total immersion storytelling, written with the confidence only an insider can provide. More than a novel, this is an experience. Relatable, sinister, and incredibly clever. Calling Hollywood, this is your next big movie. So we could go on, but I'll leave it there so that we can talk.
Well, thank you, Kelly,
again.
first of all, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you about this book. What can you tell us about The Society? How do you describe it?
The Society is a suspenseful, twisty tale of two women whose lives become darkly intertwined with a secret society in the heart of Boston. So one is a high-end antiques dealer who chases a rumored family fortune tied to the Knox Secret Society, and then she ends up vanishing without a trace. And the other is a young 25-year-old nurse who follows the thin trail into the society itself. And both women will soon discover that more so than status or money, secrets are the society's true currency.
Oh, I love that. Secrets are the true currency. What was the spark that got this particular story started for you?
Well, first of all, I live in Beacon Hill where the book is set. And I think I'm starting to realize this is my second novel that I am very much inspired by, people say, oh, is it plot first or character first? But I think
Yeah.
it's environment or atmosphere first, setting. I think that is what initially sparks my imagination and gets my creative wheels to begin turning. So, because my first book was set in this sort of fictionalized version of my hometown in the 1980s. And then this version, now I live in Boston in this beautiful neighborhood of Beacon Hill, which for those of people who may not know, it's this charming area with cobblestone streets and gaslit lamps and red brick buildings. And there's just so much like history and mystery, literally as you walk along through the neighborhood. So I was very much inspired by this setting that I get to experience every day, this kind of magical place. And it just seemed like the perfect backdrop for like a secret society. With the sort of history that it holds, and all these buildings are different and they're kind of quirky. And I love when I get to go um, visit other people's homes and kind of or apartments and see where they live, because each place is different and has its own personality and character. But I often write at this place called the Boston Athenaeum, which is this beautiful old private, like membership only library that
Cool.
dates back. Yeah, it's very cool. It dates back to the 1800s, and they have tours there. And so one day, I would often like be writing and see these people being led by a tour. And I'm like, one day I'm like, I'm going to take a tour. And when we passed by this oil portrait of this man by the name of Thomas Handison Perkins, who was a major benefactor to the library in the 1800s, the docent alluded to this dark history as to how he had made a majority of his fortune, and it was in the opium trade. And I was sort of fascinated by this, and fell down this research rabbit hole to discover, to my surprise, that just how many these Brahmin families in the 1800s actually made their wealth in the opium trade. So when thinking about my secret society, you have to have a reason for it to exist.
Mhm.
And so I imagine that it had formed as a way for these, as a physical place and way for these wealthy Brahmin families to meet and to discuss their dealings in the international opium trade.
Love it. I love it. Now you've got me wanting to go to Beacon Hill and hang out in your
Yes.
special library.
Yeah.
I have to ask you because your bio says you may or may not have been a member of a secret society yourself. So,
That is
have
true.
you been in a secret society?
Yes, in college. Well, I can't answer that. No, I'm kidding. In college, I was in a secret society called Tabard at UPenn, which is still in existence. And yeah, it was a fun experience. My best friends from college are the ones who I met in Tabard, and yeah, it's fun. We're actually gonna I'm on this WhatsApp group for Tabard, and we're gonna have like a virtual book club with it, so that should be fun. Yeah.
I was going to say, how do they feel about you?
Yeah. No, I mean it's yeah, it's not what you think.
What was the research process like for this book? Because there's a lot of what feels like in-depth history. So what was the research like?
Yeah, I actually had to do a lot of research for this. First of all, I had to world build in a way that I didn't have to with my previous novels. I mentioned before, I had to figure out why the secret society existed. Um, I had to understand like what it believed in and its um, values and what it wants, who the members are, why it continues to exist. And so for that, I looked at other secret societies. I read a lot of books about secret societies, kind of dipped into that world. I have, these two protagonists, one who is an high-end antiques dealer. She owns this antique store in Beacon Hill. So for that, I literally went to, and Beacon Hill is the home of like the original antique row here in Boston, where there used to be like a lot of antique shops dotting the street. Now there are less, but they're still there. So I actually went to one of them and spoke to the owner there, and she was a wonderful resource. I picked her brain about what it's like to own an antique store in Beacon Hill. And then my other protagonist is a nurse, an ER nurse at Mass General Hospital. And luckily, I don't have to go too far with the research with that because I'm a nurse practitioner, and I once worked at Mass General. I worked in the ICU, not in the ER, but and I had personally moved to Boston in my late 20s, not really knowing anybody. So as Taylor Adams does as well. So tapped into that idea of being an outsider moving to Boston and what that feels like. But we're very different. And I was a good nurse.
Well, I was about to
Taylor
say,
made some questionable choices.
is there one of your protagonists that you, Taylor and Vivian, that you feel like you identify with more or sort of has more of you in it? I guess I feel like that's a weird question as an author, of course.
Sure.
We're
Yeah.
putting a lot of ourselves into each of our characters, but
Yeah. I mean, sure. Like someone said to me, actually, I just had my Boston book launch last week. So Vivian is 44. Taylor, as I mentioned, is 25. I'm closer to Vivian's age, let's just say that. But someone said to me, they're like, "Oh, I love how you dress like Vivian for your book launch." And I was like, "What?" And then I realized I had literally, like, there's this pivotal scene in terms of where the two cross paths, these two women, and it's essentially so Vivian goes looking for this rumored family um, fortune tied to the Knox because all of a sudden, even though she has this antique store, she finds herself in sudden financial dire straits. And so she decides, as I said, to chase down this fortune, and she goes knocking on the Knox Secret Society's door, and she knows them because she has sourced antiques for them through the years, but she's never been there. So she knocks on the door, and she meets Peter Wales, who's this charming Knox insider, handsome, and they start dating, and maybe her priorities get a little muddled. And the next thing we know, she shows up in Taylor's emergency room with injuries from a suspicious fall. So that is where Taylor first encounters her. And the outfit that she comes, and Taylor, by the way, grew up in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. Her dad owns a crab house restaurant, and kind of always wanted more in life, always used to watch these wealthy tourists come each summer and then like move back out. And she and her own mother abandoned their family for Boston when she was young. So to her, Boston epitomized this glamorous, sophisticated city, something more from where she was from, or more sort of just elegance and excitement. So she moves to Boston thinking it's going to be that. And it's not. She's a nurse, and she's working, and she's living paycheck to paycheck, and essentially once again feels like she's looking at wealth from the outside. This time from the literally from the through the windows of these like beautiful Beacon Hill and Back Bay townhomes who leave their drapes open. But when Vivian rolls into her emergency room, she is everything that uh, Taylor thought Boston was going to be, because she's glamorous and she's beautiful, from her designer shoes to her luxurious hair. So bringing this all full circle here, the outfit that Vivian is wearing is this tea-length brown skirt, cream blouse, and red Louis Vuitton shoes. And I don't have red Louis Vuitton shoes, but I wore a tea-length brown skirt, a blouse, a cream blouse, and like reds or like kind of dark maroon satin shoes to my Boston book launch. And I did not even realize that I had channeled Vivian. So that it was just so funny that I did that. So to answer your question, which is long-winded way of, I think that I think I drew on elements of me, pieces of me for both characters. I think that, but I have two children. I'm a mom. Vivian never had children.
Mhm.
So I think you start off at one point and then you kind of go from there. But in terms of like where Vivian is in life, I probably am closer to her at this stage. I will say she was harder to write. Sorry, Taylor was harder to write though than Vivian.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
In what way?
I think I think because, but I was actually also surprised by that too from early reads. My editor or my people in my writing group, that they felt like they knew who Vivian was pretty quickly.
Mm,
Because Vivian she's, um, she, her character, she keeps more to herself. And well, they both actually kind of keep to themselves, is interesting, but Vivian's just a little more reserved.
mhm,
But she is exactly who she is. And I think that there's almost like this little distance with her. But I think that I captured that. Whereas
mhm,
Taylor, I guess in what way is because it's just in terms of who they are as characters. I had like, because Taylor is 25 and searching, I almost had a little bit more trouble getting into her perspective and understanding who she is and what she's searching for. But I think it's not a fault of her character. It's inherent to who she is as a character, if that makes sense.
yes, that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that, getting more
Deeply.
deeply into the characters and developing them?
Well, at one point I actually switched to writing this novel's told in third person.
Hmm.
One point I switched to writing first person, and I knew I was going to go back to third.
Hmm.
But I did that temporarily for Taylor, because I needed to embody her more. So that was definitely one technique that I did. And I just think also just continuing um, to think about these characters and live with them for a while. And eventually they became more clear to me.
Well, speaking of writing in first person and characters, some of the chapters are in the point of view of the Knox, the building itself. And I thought that that was so brilliant. How did those chapters materialize?
Thank you. Yeah, so uh, these both of these women are outsiders to the Knox secret society, um, and so Vivian, is dating the person, and then ends up in the hospital, and then Taylor, when she goes to try to find out what happened to her patient, and just in general her own sort of journey in life, leads her to the Knox. And as I mentioned, her father owned that crab house restaurant, so she grew up as a waitressing at her dad's restaurant. So she actually gets a waitressing job at the Knox. But they're both outsiders,
Mhm.
and there is a lot going on at at the Knox. There's a lot going on present day. There are some elements from its past that play a role in the present day. And I realized at some point that I needed an insider perspective.
Mhm.
And so I was looking at my cast of characters, trying to figure out who's who can I give more of a voice to and bring in the fold. But my editor and agent um, thought that I should stick with just the two women because they didn't want to detract from their story.
Mhm.
And then one of them had suggested an omniscient narrator. And then that gave me the idea I said, well, what if, what if we make the building itself chime in from like have a voice, and literally if these walls could talk. And almost to my shock, maybe they were
Mhm.
on board for it. So I tried it out, and I ended up loving writing the Knox character. He has this persona of this like old Beacon Hill snob.
Mhm.
He's definitely been there since the beginning of the 1800s when this building was built, and he's kind of seen it all. Anyway, he was really fun to write. So that's how, and it made perfect sense. Like I said, because there was that backstory that does influence the present day storyline.
It works really well. And then you also have some other interstitial chapters. We get to see a little bit of the handbook
Yeah.
for the secret society, and we get to see some emails and some things. When did that come about? How did
Yeah.
these other pieces come in?
Maybe like once they gave me the green light with the building, I was like, I just went off on a tangent. I don't know. But it did kind of actually, in a way, it did allow me a little more freedom to think about this book differently. There is a lot going on in this book. There
Mhm.
are a lot of characters. It's two or three point of views, right? If you count the Knox, it's a dual timeline. It's like basically present day and then 2 months earlier. But then for part of it too, Vivian is in this coma. So there's a lot going on.
Mhm.
And so I just thought about how can I present the information that I need to present. Um, yeah, and so I looked into that, and I also was thinking about, I mentioned I had kids, and I have
Mhm.
a 13-year-old son, and I was thinking about technology and devices and our attention spans and how people get information these days. So I just thought it would be neat to tie in some multimedia type of things.
Mhm.
So, I have a Reddit thread, I have emails, I have text messages, which I guess isn't so novel these days, but just all of it together. And and that was really fun. I have a book, I have letters, like letters from the
Mhm.
1800s, and it was just a really great and fun way to kind of push myself as a writer too, and to see what I could do with that. And then the handbook was just so much fun to write too. So that there's literally pages from the Knox handbook.
Mhm.
Uh, of practice and procedures. And those also reveal information about what's going on because there's an initiation upcoming. So they kind of give some insight into that. So, yeah.
What is your process like? How do you go from your spark of an idea to that finished draft?
It's messy. Yeah, and this book, I sold it before I wrote it. I sold it based on the first few chapters, which also ended up changing as they always do, and a synopsis, which I'm sure ended. I should go back and look at it, but I'm sure it changed. And I had a deadline with this. So I didn't have the luxury of time with it where I would be able to take portions of this and send it to my writers group and be like, well, what do you think?
Mhm.
And I really had to just kind of get through it.
Oh, I'm feeling stressed just as you're as you're saying
Yeah.
this.
So I had to get through it. But then and it also wouldn't have been beneficial for me to get partial feedback or feedback
Mhm.
a partial story. I really needed feedback on the whole thing. So so there was a point though where I felt like I was going a little mad with all of these characters and story, and I actually just didn't even know if it made sense.
Mhm.
I ordered this giant whiteboard that's on rollers, and I rolled it into my office. There was like barely any room for it. And I had, two markers and for Vivian and Taylor and two different timelines and like trying to figure it out. And it started off writing in Microsoft Word. At one point, I switched to I forget the software, uh, where it was a software where you can kind of,
Is it Scrivener?
yeah, Scrivener, exactly. Where you can sort of play around a little more with, or you can more easily play around with maybe shifting chapters around.
Mhm.
And I did that for a little bit, but then I needed to go back to Word just because I'm so used to writing in Word, and I really kind of needed to see it all flow together. But for a brief period, that was helpful as well. But that was also tricky, just figuring out from a pacing and tension standpoint, how it all would play together. So yeah, so I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I wish I don't know. You should, if you had talked to me then, you would have, I probably would have been mumbling to myself.
But it does come together so beautifully. And I was thinking as you were kind of describing everything that's going on earlier, yeah, there is a lot going on, but it doesn't feel confusing or bogged down or
Right.
any of that when you're reading it. It's very
Yes.
pacey and twisty and it all makes sense and you feel like you're going through it and like it works. So but it feels like I can imagine that it would be like a puzzle that you're trying to put together to figure out how to get all of that in the
Yes,
right timeline to make it work.
it was a puzzle. And then I also, right, like A did, it was a puzzle. So A, does it make sense? And then B, I was almost curious if people were going to believe this because I hadn't written anything like that. Like, would people believe this secret society? And somehow they do. And that was never in question from my editor or my writer group or early or friends, author friends who read it. And so that felt good. I was like, oh, thank goodness.
How was the experience different with this second book than with your first book?
um, Well, I think that just having that deadline for better or
Mhm.
worse, I had to maybe be a little less precious about my sentences, about the story. Um, I had to kind of forge ahead. Um, but I also had more confidence as a writer too. So,
Mhm.
and I definitely felt that this time around. So I think there are both of those elements there. But it's very different. I mean, when you're writing your first book, you have no idea if it's ever going to see the light of day. You don't have an agent. You're just writing and have no idea what's going to happen with it, but you're writing because you believe in it and you want to. So there is that difference. Yeah.
Have you always been a writer?
I've always been a writer. Yeah. I mean, back in the day, I remember I must have been in third or fourth grade. I had made a book of poems that I typed up on my parents' typewriter. Um, and I don't know, could you make, maybe I made copy on a Xerox? I don't know, but I definitely had a few of them. I wouldn't have typed it all again, I don't think, but somehow I had a couple of different ones and gave them to my family and friends. So I've always loved writing. Um, always loved writing, yeah. And I knew the thing that I think is so amazing about writing is anyone can write. Like you can pick up a pen, open up your laptop and write. Like there's nothing stopping you. Um, and it's like you and the page and your story and anyone can do it. And I knew that. And I also love nursing, which I did for a while. And I'm still maintain my license and still have my foot in the door with some healthcare consultant stuff. But I knew that I could pursue both of these careers. And I have. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
What was the road to publication like for you?
Um, it's the typical story, right? With a lot of doubt, hard work, perseverance. I have been in the same Boston writing group since I'm trying to remember. I mean, 2009, maybe 2008. It's been a long time. And one of us now lives in California, one lives in Michigan. So we meet now on Zoom, but we're still going strong. So I've always just uh, I've always written, have always sought feedback, always sought writing community. At some point, as I was nursing for a while, I realized that um, I was kind of lacking the like I took extra writing classes when I was at Penn, um,
Mhm.
but I was in the nursing program. Um, so as I was working as a nurse and writing on the side, I just felt like I I just I needed more instruction in writing. Um, and I was writing, I lived in the city of Hoboken, and
Mm.
I was writing for this like defunct website. And I was writing for the hospital newsletter, just kind of getting and writing where I could. But I was cognizant that I needed a little more formal instruction. So I applied for this low residency MFA program, and um, it was at Fairleigh Dickinson University, and it was the only one I applied to. And the reason why I applied to it was because they didn't ask for any recommendations. And they based their admittance admission standards only on the writing sample. Because I had no idea who I would have asked for a recommendation, right? Like, what was I going to ask my nurse manager to write a recommendation for a master's in writing program, right? So
Such a great point. It does kind of feel like that recommendation requirement is a little like, well,
right, especially if you're starting out and like
yeah.
writing is your kind of hobby.
Mhm.
It's anyway, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna put this out there, and if it's meant to be, it'll be. And I got in. And I think when you're a writer, there's all these like little things that happen that can um I said it was a typical writer path, a lot of disappointments, but there's also parts along the way that build you up. And
Mhm.
you definitely need those, and it's nice to have those and to celebrate those and recognize them. And even to this day, my author friends and I celebrate the small wins because it's really gratifying to have those. Yeah. So anyway, so I did this MFA program, um, and then I had written a bunch of short stories. I had hundreds of rejections for these short stories. And at some point, I was like, I'm just gonna. I almost like turned to a novel because I just didn't want to try to get rejected again. And I just wanted to write for the love of writing and not
Yeah.
trying to get published. So embarked on my first novel, which took several years. I don't even know how long it took. It took a long time, but it wasn't the only thing I was doing.
Mm.
I was working, I was a mom. And then at some point I realized that like, what am I waiting for? Like I kind of need to prioritize this because if I don't, nobody's going to do it for me.
Mhm.
And so I made it more of a priority where I actually set some goals to finish a draft, queried agents, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
So when you got to that point where you were querying agents,
Uh-huh.
how did it all
Happen.
happen? Yeah.
Um, so I went to this writing conference. There's this wonderful writing center in Boston called Grub Street.
Mm.
And they used to have this thing called the Muse in the Marketplace, where you could attend, and then for a fee, you could meet face to face with an agent. So I decided to do that one year, and met my now agent. So when I met her was probably premature, but I just wanted to not miss the opportunity essentially.
Mhm.
So she read the first like 30 pages of my book, and she was like, send this to me when you're done. I will say too that I think I was like the only writer she ever signed. Like it's not necessarily like it's hard, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not guaranteed any of this, right? But I sent it to her. I think it was like 14 months later. I sent it to her. Um, and um, and then I also queried other agents too, where you're just looking to see what type of agents represent the type of work that your novel is. And was trying to target like agents that were still building their client list as opposed to hitting somebody who was like a senior agent where my chances would be less likely.
Mm.
And I ended up getting through that process and offer representation. So that I circled back um, to Stacy Testa, who's my agent, who was still considering my material. Um, and she said, okay, then that moved it up to the top of her pile. And she said, okay, I'm going to look at this now, and then I think I had asked her for like if I could let the other agent know, who I would have been very like, who was lovely. And I wouldn't have queried her if I hadn't been interested. And it was, I think I said, I want to let this other agent know in 2 weeks or by the 2 week mark. I think it was like the 13th day that Stacy emailed me, and yeah, and then we had a call, and I just felt like she got who I was as a writer, and her vision for, she's a very editorial, hands-on agent too, and
Mm.
she had some suggestions about my book, which made a lot of sense to me, and so I ended up picking her. And then we did a revision together on my first book, which was Our Little World, and just grab that once here, which is a coming of age set in 1980s New Jersey. It's about these two sisters whose relationship fractures when a neighborhood girl goes missing. So there is that mystery element there, but it's more of a coming of age story. But we did a revision together, and then we went out on submission, and she had sent it out to like maybe like a handful of editors, and they all passed. And we took their feedback, what they had to say, and did another revision on it. And then we, a few months later, like 4 or 5 months later, we were ready to go out again. And this time she sent it to a lot more, kind of like just a bunch. And I got an offer very quickly. I think it was within like 2 weeks, from Dutton, who was the editor at Dutton, who ended up buying this book. So it was a long process, but it was long. But I felt like it was also like the stars also aligned for me in a lot of ways.
And then for your second book, you said that was sold before it was finished. Before.
Yes. Yeah. So there's the option clause where you can where basically you show your next work to your publisher, and they get like right of first refusal on it, essentially. And that work can consist of, it probably depends on your contract, but for me, it consisted of a few chapters and a synopsis. So presented that to my editor, who I was very excited to work with again, and she ended up buying it. So that was great. She ended up actually moving to another publisher though. But the team at Dutton is wonderful, and they paired me with another editor at Dutton, Charlotte Peters, who's fabulous. And so she ended up being my editor for the society.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's a great story. And thank you for sharing all of that, because I
Of
think it's
course.
really, all of these things are just so
Yeah.
good to know.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like when I had the call with, when I was querying agents, my sister, who I'm very close to, um, when they asked for the call, my sister Amy said, "Don't tell them how long it's taken you to write Our Little World." She's like, "They're gonna think you're like a one-hit wonder or something." Which is funny. And yeah, so I just share that to say that it was a journey. Like I think that people that knew me knew that I'd been wanting to be a writer for years, and doing this path. I remember when I announced the book deal for Our Little World, one of my friends said, "Oh, you're an overnight success, ha ha ha!" Right? You knew how I had been working for so long. So yeah.
You seem to work across genres a little bit. You just mentioned Our Little World is sort of more of a coming of age story. The Society is this kind of twisty thriller. I believe you're working right now on a dark comedy, collaborating with some other authors. You have
Yeah.
a dystopian short story coming up in
Yeah.
Plowshares.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
So, I'm just wondering sort of how that works for you. Do you find it creatively fulfilling to sort of dip into different genres and different forms like that?
I do. I think maybe I'm getting weirder with each thing, right? No, I just it's been great. I knew I was taking a little bit of a risk moving from our little world to the society, because it's still me as a writer, but it is very different. Like our little world is this nostalgic kind of tearjerker coming of age, and then the
Mm.
society is, suspense and a little edgier, secret society. Um, but I don't know, it felt to me like the right move. I also and in some ways, um I'm not I'm happy to say this, that there's a character in the society, Nicholas.
Mm. Mhm.
And he's this bookstore, he's a very minor character.
Mhm.
He's this bookstore owner of uh, this bookstore called Turn Pages, which is a fictional bookstore in Boston. And he's actually a character that I have known in my head for a long time,
Mm.
because I wrote one of those very short stories that got rejected, was about him. So it's never been published. But he's a character whose story I've known for years. And um, I have been wanting to write take that short story and make it a book for a long time. And so in some ways, I almost felt like I wrote the society to get to him. So
Oh,
that
that's
will be
cool.
like my next um, solo project, book
Mhm.
length project, and I'm really excited. And I feel like I'm ready at this point in my career, having grown as a writer, to do him justice. So, and I can't really talk about what it's, just because I don't want to. I'm not ready yet to tell what it's about, but yeah, just super excited to work on that.
What do you know now that you wish you had known before publishing your first book?
Um, I think I wish I had known that it goes in waves. Like
Mhm.
there's like highs and lows, and it's not a it's it fluctuates. I think sometimes, like, I still have people that find our little world and reach out to me, and that's amazing. um
Mm.
and it's just this, I guess, this idea that books live on, and that nothing's going to happen at once or happen how you think it's going to happen, but there's value in what you've written, and it can continue to exist and come back in unexpected ways.
That kind of follows in really beautifully to my next question, which is, do you have a favorite piece of advice for aspiring authors?
um I knew you were going to ask this because I was listening to your voice. um and I still don't know what I'm going to say. No, there was this quote I heard, and I'm probably not going to say it correctly, but the essence of it was that the people, the person who's a writer slash author, the person who's still writing or is considered a writer, is the one who's still writing when everybody else has quit. Um,
Mm.
and I think that's just so true. So if you are a writer, you will write. And you'll just persevere. And when I said my story was a typical story, it's you have to have a thick skin. You have to love writing. And you just have to keep going with it. And that does lend into the advice, the previous question, because you just don't know what's going to happen at all. And yeah, so just keep, if that's really what you love to do, and it's okay to take breaks or take a year, 2 years, whatever it is. But if you really want to be a writer and love it, you just have to do it.
I love that. I wanted to ask you too before you wrap up, because talking about just doing it and persevering, and you're persevering through having the nursing job and doing all of the writing. And what is your routine like? Are you writing every day? How do you sort of, and you're a mom, how do you balance everything?
Not very well. We're all just, I always, at the end of the day, I'm, I just, I just say to myself, I'm just doing the best I can, right? We're
Mhm.
all just doing the best we can. And yeah, that's all you can do. I think my daughter has been missing me these past, couple weeks, because I have been busy with book events and things, and it's apparent. So, tonight I have another book event, but I said, and my husband's, of course, away now for a few days, but I said, sleep in my bed. Daddy's not here, and so when I get home, I'll just like be in bed with you. You just, and I drop balls all the time, like all
Mhm.
the time. But just trying to do the best I can in terms of it. That's like best I can, showing up as a mom,
Mhm.
as a wife, as a friend, as a daughter, as a sister. So I just try to do the best I can, as a citizen, doing my part in making the world a better place.
Mhm.
Uh, but as a nurse, but I think from the writing perspective, um, I just wish there were more hours in the day, to be honest. It depends where I am in the writing process. That sort of first draft, the grunt work, you just have to show up and it's ugly, and you're um, just working on it, and it's hard. And I think for me, at least, as much as I can do it, I'm a morning person. So that
Mhm.
often means getting up sometimes often means getting up before my kids get up,
Mhm.
and working on it as I can. And then I try to be present for them after school. Um, and also at that point, my brain's usually fried. But then there's sports and this and that. But I don't know. And then in terms of the revision editing, that's actually, I think, a little more consuming, because that's when you're peeling back those layers of who these characters are and what the story is really about. But that's, to me, is like the magic part,
Mhm.
when they are uh, infringing on your life a little, right? Like they're demanding your attention too, because you're thinking about them all the time. And for me, at least, I am, and I'm in the shower thinking about them driving. And that's when I really feel, actually, even though I'm like physically maybe showing up for my kids or whatever,
Mhm.
that I'm actually maybe not totally there, because I have one foot really immersed in this fictional world that I'm creating. But it's also like amazing, right? That's so fun to me. Yeah, so I'm a writer who actually loves the revision process. So yeah, and then there's your copy. It just depends in the writing process, but I do think that the more you show up and sit at your computer or wherever, and I'm taking my computer with me everywhere. I'm sitting there in the school pickup line working on things. I'm doing whatever I can to work on stuff. But I think the more you're plugged into something, the more their creativity can flow.
That's such a great point. The more you're plugged in, the more the creativity can flow, the more you sort of touch the work. Maybe I've heard it
Yes.
described as too. We have a traditional final question
Okay.
on this podcast,
Uh-huh.
and it is when the society is made into a movie or series,
Yeah.
what do you think the theme song should be?
Ooh. I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of a cop out to be like Succession theme song. But I mean something sort of like that maybe. Yeah. Yeah, something maybe like that or something kind of that feels like sexy and edgy and strong, but Secret Society-esque.
I love now I'm picturing it. I'm hearing the Succession theme song with like the images in my head of the Knox and it's working.
Okay.
Karen Winn, thank you so, so much for coming on today. It has been a treat talking to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate being here.
Thanks for joining us on Literary Prospects. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'll see you next time.